Welcome back all. This is Daz from Model Techniques. Up this week, we've got Kaustav Chatterjee from Trains and Dioramas for a second review. So we talk all things 3D printing and what he's been doing with his channel with some lovely dioramas that he's got going. Don't forget to subscribe, like, hit that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming content. Also, I've got a Patreon page. A big shout out to all my Patreons out there. Every little bit counts. So without further ado, let's get started. Scenery lighting without wiring, so powerful yet so easy. DwarvenEnterprises.com. Dwarven Enterprises will be offering MRT viewers a 10% discount on all sales. Use the code word MRT2021 to get this deal. Welcome back, Kaustav from Trains and Dioramas. Thanks for chatting with me today at Model Techniques.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dazzy. And this has been a pleasure. I still remember, I think last year we had a couple of, collaborations. So I think the first we started with our boat.
We did.
The little boat collaboration and then the interviews. I'm absolutely happy to be back.
Yeah, lovely.
No question about it.
I was just looking at that the other day, our little boats.
Mm-hmm.
My little boat fell off the bench and broke. So I've got to put it back together. But it's nearly a year ago we did that. I think it was in July of last year we got together and did that. But so we might have to do something else when time allows at some stage, because that was a lot of fun. So now,
absolutely, yeah, and I think you can see in my background. So I think both you and I, we have pretty much taken the 3D printing route. So
correct.
We can definitely do some collaboration about 3D printing and whatnot, and see. Yeah,
definitely. We'll definitely chat about that in a sec, because obviously we got similar paths we appear to be going there, but also, obviously modelling different parts of the world, which is also exciting. So for people that don't know Kaustav, I don't know if you don't, I don't know where you've been, but trainsanddioramas.com is the website. He's got a Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all under the same name. I'll put everything in the link below so you can come and look at some of his fine work. So as I said, it's been a while since we had a chance to sort of catch up. This seems to be, our lives are busy, work and play and everything else in between, and pandemic, which we won't lament on too much because that'll just depress us, I think. So, one common thing is we love trains, we love modelling. So, what have you been doing of recent times?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you. I think my last big project was that ruin. Vignette, I would say. It's not technically a diorama. On the small IKEA dome I made, the ruin. And then I think the only other big project which didn't really become a YouTube video or anything like that was I built, Darjeeling Himalayan Railways NDM6, custom built model for Ranjiv Dubey. Yep. So about Ranjiv. So as far as my knowledge goes, he's possibly one of the very few modelers who are doing Indian Railways model in that scale if you really and for the viewers who haven't seen that, so in my channel you can find his Kalka Shimla Railway, which is a beautiful Indian Railways model that he's built. Possibly the only one in the entire world of that scale. Like, there are a lot of people who tried making Indian Railways model in different scale. But as far as that, bigger layout, possibly, that's the only one that at least that I know of. Now, I built, a couple of DHR NDM6 for him. I think that was back February, March. And after that, it's been a pretty rough phase, to be honest. I haven't been able to do modeling. I had some personal incident going on at work. Then I contracted COVID and whatnot. So I'm still sort of going back into the game, so to speak. There are lots of things in the plans, though. So there, as Dazzy, so my interest is pretty varied, right?
Yeah,
it's not
you and me both.
fixed to, so it's not fixed to one thing. started with American model railroading, and then I got into some serious scratch building and things like that. Then after I started looking at Indian model railroading in recent days, just been about a couple of years, I think there is a huge opportunity there. So lots of projects are actually in the pipeline, to be honest. And along with that, now I'm learning a new skill of 3D printing and whatnot.
Yeah.
So hopefully, if things go right, we're gonna see a lot of activity in Trains and Dioramas and in my modeling work.
Yeah, nice. Quite interesting. It's quite interesting. Beautiful segue into the 3D printing side of things. It's something that I think individually we've sort of got into without sort of knowing each other. And then I think I put a video, you put a video, and I thought, why did we do a collaboration around that side of things and different parts of the world? But our lives get busy. Obviously, I've been working with Jerry Bunyan. Please, sorry, Jerry, if I've pronounced your name incorrectly, from Pegasus Designs. We're doing a little collaboration. He's doing a model for me right now for a South Australian Railways. I won't go into it too much because it's something that hasn't been built before. And I literally just sent him some measurements and photographs today. So I'm looking forward to what he can come up with, because he has got a talent, that man. I'll give that to him. He's a very, very talented man. So what have you been doing with Jerry, I suppose? Because you've been doing a little bit of work with him as well, is my understanding.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I think, with Jerry, it's been a really exciting venture. So as I said, so I was not really into Indian railways modeling. I mean, I was pretty much focused on American railroading. My first layout was an American railroad. And in fact, even today, my next really big project is about building logging railroad based on the Adirondacks Mountain in about 1940s, towards the few last years of logging railroading there. Now, that's what I was focusing on, getting into American railroading pretty much in different ways and making different types of layouts and so on and so forth. But then, Jerry came along and I think we started, talking about 4 years ago. And then, I was not really I didn't really have that much of faith in 3D printing back then. I was like, you know what, I'll just give it a try. And then we started talking. And then, of course, some of the topics that came up, right? Darjeeling Himalayan Railways, that's what I started with. It's a beautiful, beautiful, railway. Back in 2011, I actually did a prototype study of, 3 different parts of that railway, keeping in mind that one day I want to build a layout. And so now and then, of course, it didn't really work out because Backward Miniatures, they stopped producing any models, and they actually used to produce the B class. You can still get the NDM6 kit from the Worsley models, but in the UK. But then, I just thought like one NDM6, and then just for an edge kit, it was quite expensive and so on and so forth, especially considering import and everything. So I wasn't really sure what to do about the whole thing. And then Jerry came along, and even initially, we didn't really know how this thing is going to go. And we just thought of giving some test prints from a guy in China. And those prints came so close to injection molded models and so beautifully done. That's when both Jerry and we sort of started realizing the potential 3D printing possibly has, and how much we can do with modern 3D printing technology to sort of get into this uncharted territory of Indian railways modeling, which many people have tried, but it has never been done, at a proper scale or quality, so to speak. I mean, there are different people tried doing scratch building, and there are some, fabulous modelers in India who have done, Indian railways models, but they are all focusing on the model, so to speak. Some of those are static, some of those are large scale, G scale, or gauge 1 models that are run by battery operated power or whatnot. But they're not really focused on models that you can build into a layout. And as you know, I am all about layout, right? A model interests me only when it's part of a layout or a diorama, only when it has a stage. That's what is really important to me. So that's how we started for very personal projects of Darjeeling Himalayan Railways in mind. And then, I looked at, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, because of Jerry, I even started learning more about Indian Railways and its hidden gems, right? I mean, the narrow gauge railways, there is one in Matharan. That's actually my next big project. Before Darjeeling Himalayan Railways, I'll just get into possibly in a couple of weeks or so. To actually build a small diorama and completely 3D printed locomotive, rolling stock, everything. So the entire train set is going to be 3D printed. Yep. And I'm going to build this diorama of, a small diorama of Matharan railways. Of course, taking inspiration from the actual prototype scenes and sceneries, which is something that is very, very close for me. So that's how we started. That's what we have been going on, and of course, this partnership with Jerry has been so pleasant for both of us. We are, as of right now, we are partner in crimes, and we are giving it a serious thought of what more we can do. And now, that we have hands-on experience with 3D printing, and now it's a steep learning curve. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, getting the 3D printer is possibly the easiest part. I think even now I'm trying to, build the print a few models for for a friend of mine, and it's like 50% failure rate. So especially when you're looking for perfection, right? I mean, for your personal use and things like that, you might be able to weather it or whatnot and make it work. But for something that really holds that quality aspect of it, and something that can compete with possibly an RTR model in the level of detail and level of strength and rigidity that we are talking about. It is not easy to achieve that for an operational model train in 3D printing, especially when we are talking about locomotives and all. So I mean, I think Ranjiv's project, and again, he was a benefactor of Jerry's design. So the NDM6 was it's Jerry's design. That was an eye-opening, part of for me at least, that what can be achieved. Sure. Even those are actually even shapeways prints. They're not even proper 4K resin printed models. Even then, the level of details that I could achieve. I am really hopeful that this, collaborations that I'm doing right now with Jerry will bring out something really exciting, not just for Indian railways, but also for those obscure railways in the world that generally you don't see in model form in that high degree of quality. Yeah. So that's basically what we are focusing on together.
Sure.
Yeah.
So 3D printing, hobby within the hobby, I'm finding it. It's probably the steepest learning curve, I think, that I've undertaken within this hobby, except some of the train controller or some of the computer programs out there to run your train. That's been quite steep for me as well. So I've only got a Anycubic Photon Mono, which is just 2K. So my next step, I think, will be there's one over your left shoulder there, would be. So tell us a little bit about the 4K back there, and tell us the brand, the model, and sort of how you're finding it. Because obviously it's not just double the level of, what you would call it, the level
of
resolution or detail. It goes further than that, is what my understanding is, once you get into 4K.
Yeah, no, I think one of the most, and there is a reason behind me getting so heavily invested in 3D printing. And just, I bought my first 3D printer, which is, the Mini here. So that was back in February. And, and then I released that video telling everybody, all my viewers, that I have started with 3D printing. And the initial results were fascinating. So I just downloaded bikes, bicycles from Thingiverse, and those were in HO scale. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't I try cranking it up to N scale? I was sure that those prints are going to fail and I'm not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can achieve with these 4K printers, to be honest. I mean, an N scale bike, you can literally see the texture of the basket in an N-scale bike, and you cannot even possibly see that in your naked eye. You have to literally put that under the microscope. I'm sorry, under the magnifying glass, but it's there. So the details are there. So the way I found the 4K printing is it's all about taking the benefit of it at the miniaturization level. So if smaller you print, higher the return. Now, if I am printing a full locomotive, considering that I again have to orient it in a different way, and no matter how good your printer is, whether it's 4K, whether it's 8K, and Frozen has come up with another 8K printer. I'm not really sure if you're aware of that. It's a huge beast of a printer that weighs 35 kg.
Oh, okay.
And they can possibly, print, I don't know, possibly an O-scale locomotive pretty much in one piece in that printer.
Wow.
So, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. But where I found this, 4K or 8K business, at least in my small experience of the last 3 months or so, is when you're printing bigger, I doubt it actually makes a lot of difference, because what will happen essentially is that you cannot really print at the lowest, layer height of 0.03 millimeter or whatnot, right? So because then it's going to take a ridiculous amount of time, right? Sure. I mean, a locomotive, possibly it will take 12 hours, or even not the big locomotive. Like I tried printing the NDM6, Jerry's NDM6 at 0.03. Layer height at 45-degree angle. I think it took me somewhere close to 10 hours to build one model. And that's just this much of a small HOE locomotive. Yeah. So you wouldn't go to that length. It'll possibly keep it at 0.05, sometimes even 0.06 or 0.08. Yeah. And the moment you actually do that, then it doesn't really matter if you're doing it in 2K or 4K, because the reason why you were doing looking for 4K is to get that smooth finish. That essentially might not work out, and especially our models, like the purpose we use 3D printing for, is for pretty boxy designs. Yeah. Now, it makes a lot of difference for people who are printing figures or miniature figures or figurines or Warhammer stuff, because you don't really have lines there. And, it's all smooth curvatures going up and down. Yeah. And in those scenarios, the print lines don't really come into play, because every layer, it's basically, shifting, right? So that's where I think the resolution game really plays big. But for our stuff, where you literally have, possibly 2-3 centimeter of just a thick wall, you will be able to see print lines no matter how much resolution you use. It is just going to be there, because that totally depends on the layer height. So if you cannot reduce layer height, the print lines is going to be there. If you reduce the layer height, print line's still going to be there, but it's just going to be finer. Yeah. So that's what my finding is so far in the last 3 months. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert yet. Yeah. But that's how I saw it. It might be a little different, and we'll figure out with more experimentation and with the new big printer over there. So maybe now that I start printing really big models of proper HO scale locomotives and all, we'll figure out whether it really makes sense. Yeah. Sure. I mean, it works for sure. I mean, there is no question about it. But whether 4K is really worth for printing model trains, I don't know. Printing model train figures, like if you're printing, HO scale figures, oh yes, it's absolutely, comparable to commercial figures, or the details that you can achieve there. Sure. But printing cars and printing model train stuff, I don't know if that makes a lot of difference between 2K and 4K.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting you say that, because I would have thought it would have made a much bigger difference. But I suppose there's that point where our hobby's all about compromise in some shape or form, isn't it? And then maybe this is,
of course,
it's still very early in its infancy. Injection molding's been around a long time, but you're also paying a premium price for ready-to-run injection molding. So whether you're willing to have just a little bit lesser quality maybe, but something very unique, because obviously you don't have the printing costs of if you were to do a large injection molding with all the tooling and all that. So that's, it's very interesting that moving forward with that, I think. So
so the reason why I mentioned that is because so here is a freelance. Are you able to see that on the screen?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So here is a freelance one that I just printed for a friend of mine. So when you look at it in a photo or something like that, I think it's absolutely brilliant, right? So it's as close to injection molding as you can get. But close inspection will always show you those print lines because, and this was printed at an angle. I think I printed it in this way, so at a 45-degree angle. But even then, you cannot really get rid of all the print lines. And this was printed in 0.03. So that is lowest you can get in any of these printers or even the resin. So so that's what I was talking about. So but the way I look at it, like even with those print lines, with little bit of work, with little bit of sanding here and there, this model is going to look as good as injection molded model. Sure, yes, there will be a little bit of work involved after this, a model is printed. True, but you can make it look and function as good as a injection molded model if you know how to deal with it. And another thing that I've noticed is this resin prints are pretty tough. Like this thing is so tough that I cannot even with so much of pressure, you can see, any other 3D printed models possibly 2 years ago, I wouldn't be able to,
that's right.
put so much of pressure. So these things are tough cookies. They are really going to give the longevity that lacked in the past about all these 3D printed models. So that's definitely encouraging for people like us or people who are trying to model these obscure railways and places that no commercial modeler, model maker, or manufacturers will ever touch.
Well, let's be honest. As I said, it's in its infancy. Like we've got what's it called, the FTM printers that the first came around. That's one of the reasons I didn't buy one of those, is because of the very large layers, I suppose, in these. And I don't know, I paid 400 Australian dollars for my printer. So they're very affordable. I'd like to get a bigger one, more. Hence why I'm very interested in what you've got there. Moving forward, I think will be the next big brother. I think would be because I've sort of started up a little cottage business on the side here. I'm just doing South Australian Railways and some Australian stuff that I'm slowly getting some files together, and I've been lucky enough to work with some good people from around the world in Europe and that are doing some files for me, which is good. So watch this space. Very exciting. Very exciting.
No, absolutely. I have been actually following your shop very closely, and it's actually exciting for me as well, because now I also have spent quite a bit of money on printers and resin. So the thought is going through my mind about making some unique models and make it available for people. And again, going back to my situation, so one of the reasons why it is so difficult for anyone to make any proper models in India is simply because things are not available here, right? Sure. And we have talked about this in the past, and I have written that about in many articles and whatnot that I've done before. But the point is, even I have been doing this for the last 15 years. There is absolutely nothing. Even if you want to, there is no option for anybody other than importing stuff, from abroad to get anything in India. So that is something that I feel that I am interested in future to cater to, just to make sure that the hobby grows.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful hobby. It's it can create a lot of creative energy in people. It can help people acquire a lot of new skills. So there are lots of things that I think people in this part of the world, they're missing out by not having a local supply. So I know that this 3D printing is not going to possibly become an industry in itself, but at least for interested people who want to do it but they're not able to do it, it will help them to some extent possibly. Sure. So so I'm looking at what you're doing with your shop with interest and see if we can do anything about that for people here in India.
Yeah, definitely. How are you finding them? We talked about had a lovely little shunter locomotive there. Obviously, you're having to be a little bit careful about the models you are selecting purely because then we got to find a mechanism for that is prototypical as well. I know I was working with Jerry of one particular South Australian Railways undertaking back from the 40s and 50s. We just can't get the issue is the mechanism with it. So I think we're going ahead. We've got enough drawings to get the model done, but I don't want to just have an empty shell. I want to be able to move it around and DCC put it to Dakota. So you're finding that with yours, you got to be a little bit careful just to make sure you can get the mechanism for it so you can run it as well.
That I think is possibly the biggest challenge of doing custom model, model train items, right? The standing models with 3D printing and everything is the easy part, right? Especially if you have someone who can design, the locomotive or the rolling stock. Getting that done is possibly the easiest part. But making a proper model train, end of the day, you need a good mechanism. Now, as of right now, for my, I have looked at different options. So I looked at a shop called Locos and Stuff in the UK, and they make some very good, I would say, custom mechanism in bigger scale, like up to HO or ON30. You can pretty much go with them. Then I also looked at manufacturers, especially when it comes to 009 or HON30. Both Jerry and I, we have looked at places like Tomitech, one of the manufacturers.
Sure.
Then there is also called Narrow Japan. So there are some mechanisms that can be used. And then, of course, you have in the Americas, you have, NWSL mechanisms. Now, that being said, I mean, irrespective of which custom mechanisms you pick for a particular model, it will be somewhere there will have to be a compromise, and it is never going to be cheap.
Yeah.
So, a custom mechanisms, like for an example, Locos and Stuff mechanisms can at least, even if you're doing HO scale or, ON30, it can be at least 40 pounds. And, Narrow Japan mechanisms, possible the cheapest ones, if you're going down to HON30 or, N scale and things like that.
Yeah.
Even then, though, they would cost you at least $25-$30 or something like that. And plus, if you're in India, and I don't know how it is in Australia, but if you're in India, one of the biggest challenge is our steep custom duty, right? So anything that you import, you would have to pay nearly double in custom duty plus the shipping.
Yeah.
So there things become really complicated for us, and that's why possibly even other people who tried doing Indian model trains, they couldn't really sustain it, because the mechanism is something you just cannot keep importing, right? So even for your custom models, unless you really you're in a position to invest a lot of money in model railroading, right? And that's not something that everybody is willing to do, because it's an expensive hobby. On top of that, you have to spend double for your import and whatnot. So I think that is one bit that I still have to figure out. The answer eventually is to build something in-house. Like, I understand, electronics, motors and everything. I've been doing it for long enough. And, I can, though it's now rusty, but I can possibly go back to some of my textbooks from my engineering degree days to sort of find out what needs to be done. But that being said, the real challenge is getting the supply of, those items locally. And I think that's the piece that because most of those things are produced in China, you like it or not. And we all know that there are issues importing stuff from China nowadays, not just in India, but in other countries as well. So you just have to figure out how to get those gears and motors, because even if you have the basic things, rest can still be 3D printed or built custom or scratch built or whatever it is. Because in principle, it's not really that difficult, to be honest. So you just need to have a good motor, and as long as you can mesh the gears reliably between the wheel and your driving mechanism, whether you do it directly with a worm gear or you do it through a belt drive or whatever it is going to work. Yes, it's not going to run as good as an Atlas, locomotive or a BLI or a Fleischmann locomotive for sure. There is no question that you can get that kind of running quality, but it will work, right? So that is the piece that I still have to solve, because it's not an easy puzzle to solve, to be honest.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, moving away from 3D printing a little bit.
Sure.
One thing I have noticed on particularly your Facebook, you seem to have gone back to your roots a little bit regarding your American layout. Now, what I mean by that is seems to be you're getting back into the photography side of things again. You're taking a whole lot of very different angles, I suppose, that people haven't seen before, particularly of your harbour area. You're getting down and grungy, and obviously you got a new toy because you got the little slider that I've seen that they've been using for the outdoor shots. Has been really, really exciting. So why have you gone back into the photography? Is it just something you've rekindled the flame and you just want to you want to show your tribe, so to speak?
Not really. I mean, I think I have always been interested in photography, and I think photographing my work has always been a part of the hobby for me. Like, especially because when you work in N scale, you hardly get to see anything. Even for me to be able to see something, right, I sometimes have to take good photographs and zoom it out and see what actually I have achieved, unless you want to take a magnifying glass to the model. So I think that has always been there. I think one of the things that might have happened in the past is that I didn't have the right equipment. I mean, I did have a camera, a couple of cameras some time ago, but as you know, some 7-8 years ago, the digital cameras I could afford, they couldn't really take that great photographs, right? And especially when we are talking about macro photos and things like that. Then I didn't have a camera for a long time. I got into just taking photographs and videos with my iPhone. I mean, I think the entire initial days of my YouTube, till last year, to be honest, it's all been with mobile iPhone cameras. So I recently acquired a decent camera, which is aimed at mostly taking my YouTube videos and vlogging and things like that. But it also can take fantastic photographs. It's an all-around good camera that I'm rediscovering, taking good photos and photo editing and things like that, just to bring that, whatever I'm doing to life. Because I think in my mind, the way I perceive model railroading or any model making, so to speak, it's sort of like an alternate reality. And that's where my focus is always on realism. Because if you do not make it look real, or if you're not able to achieve that, at least a certain degree of realism, then essentially it sort of, demotes itself back into a toy category. And that's definitely something you wouldn't want in your model railway. So I think that's where my passion comes from, about photographing my old work as well as my new work in different angles, taking, videos, with a different story in mind, just so that people can relate. And it's a little more than just a model train layout, right? At one point, and I still have plans to do that, but somehow it never really happened. So in my layout, I think almost all figures, they actually have a name and a story. And I wanted to do a series like, you remember Humans of New York, right? They started doing that quite some time ago, a Facebook initiative to showcase people in New York City. So I actually wanted to do that for people in my layout, like humans in miniature with their story and backstory. I started doing that for a few characters, and then it just got dropped because just other priorities came in the way. So, and you sort of have to sit down and think through the backstory and things like that. So that just brings your model to life, right? And you know this, right? For every ship on my layout, every locomotive on my layout, there is a backstory to it to support, even though it's a completely freelance layout, there is a backstory to support that. And with good photograph, that story just becomes stronger. So, people can relate, and you can sort of get down into that miniaturized world where, you are sort of in there. You're not looking at it as an outsider. You are a part of the scene. And that's pretty much what motivates me to go back into try to take better and better photographs and video of my work.
What camera have you got yourself, out of interest?
Yeah, I got myself an Olympus camera. I forgot the model, typical of me, because I hardly keep those things in my mind. I'll just show you the camera real quick. So it's a beautiful package. It's a proper travel camera with proper 4K. And this is not a crop sensor, though. It's smaller than crop sensor. So this is EM10-3. So this is the camera that I got.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it says EM10-3. So, I'll just send you the details later on.
It's a mirrorless camera, or is it a DSLR?
It's a mirrorless camera. It's a mirrorless camera, but it has everything that you can hope for in a camera of that small package, right? It has a proper viewfinder like in DSLR, because I really like going through a viewfinder most of the times. But it also has a tilted screen and everything that I can use when doing videography and stuff like that. So, and it's very tactile with all these buttons and things like that. So that's why I chose this. It's an all-around good camera that came with a couple of lenses for both long shots as well as wide zoom lenses.
Nice.
So yeah, that definitely got me back into photographing my work with more, vigor, I would say.
It's been very enjoyable. So hats off to yourself. Like some of the outdoor photos, I know that you take a lot of those photos from the balcony of your apartment there where you live in India.
Right.
Because I know you're a big proponent of the real light and how that diffuses across your models. And you got some beautiful sort of what I'd call dusk scenes with the pinks and the oranges over that gorgeous tree that you've done. And also you did some time ago a pirate ship as well, a little diorama and beach scene. That's fantastic. So I'm sort of glad that I'm glad you said what you were about getting in the nooks and crannies. I had a feeling you were going to turn around and say you were just taking a lot of photos to, I know you've been toying with how much longer your layout may be around. You might look at getting into something else as well, but maybe a conversation for another day. But maybe number three.
That layout actually stays. I think Silport stays. I think, in fact, I actually have a plan to sort of revamp that whole thing because it's been moving around for a long time. There are a few damages, and to be honest, there are a few things that I had built when I started the layout. And as you know, so most of these things are built out of cardboards and papers, right? Except that, broken coverall paint buildings, everything in there is built out of cardboard. And it is surprising how how much longevity you can get out of these cardboard models, but even then they might require some maintenance. So I actually have plans to rework on that layout as soon as I find some opportunity to sort of revamp it, give it a proper shadow box effect with proper lighting. And since I have a very elaborate night scene, and this is an inspiration I got from Vikas's, Abinster Nebenbahn, my last video. And of course, you and I, we both. Okay, fantastic. So I just, led right into it. Led you right into it. So so I think I took some inspiration after I visited that in person, the layout in person. So I of course, don't have to go the technical things that he has done with DMX lighting and, full train control and things like that. But at least just to take some good photographs, maybe. And it's so easy right now to get those LED strips that can mix lights for you.
Correct. Yeah.
I think it just, costs about 10, 15 or $20 or something like that. Yeah. You just, put, and it's a small layout. So I am actually taking some inspiration from his work, and I am thinking of putting some better lighting. I have to revamp the existing lighting and possibly get to some scale street lights, because most of those lights that you see on the layout, considering how everything else is pretty close to end scale dimensions, those lights are huge. They are really, they don't look scale when you actually take a photograph. They, sort of ruin that effect of realism. I do have plans to rework on that layout quite a bit and make it not really change things up. Like my boats and cranes, they just remain. They possibly get a newer coat of paint and possibly some additional detailing and some much more sophisticated weathering and whatnot. Rework on the lighting bit, possibly even, make that full DCC. And, that's another thing. So that layout is still DC, running on DC, right? So I am thinking of taking that full DCC, and we'll see. So that layout definitely stays. Everything else might come and go, but that layout stays for sure.
Good. I love it. I love that port scene. That's just beautiful. So as I said, that's, the little barge series or 4 videos that you did 2 or 3 years ago now. That's how I reached out to you. So apologies now.
It is fantastic.
Yeah. You've touched on Vickers and Abinstein layout. I came across this layout on YouTube a few years ago now.
Yeah.
And it's probably it's quite interesting. We're going to talk about 2 gentlemen, that and Ranjiv, probably 2 of the finest layouts getting around. Definitely, obviously, in India, the 2 of the finest layouts. Abinstein is probably one of the finest layouts in the world, period, in my mind.
Absolutely.
Obviously, it's a little bit of close to home for me as well, because it's a European steam. He's a little bit more sort of steam diesel sort of transition type area, where I'm a little bit further back into the 1900s.
Right.
Just talk us through this gentleman. Just hearing him talk, it's always interesting to hear someone talk about their layout, and this gentleman has been sort of a little bit of an idol of mine. Him and another gentleman who Vickers has actually met, called Joseph Brandl from Germany, who's a professional layout builder, who I think is probably the best landscape modeler, I think, just about going around. He did a video series on, I don't know the German, but it's like the Black Forest Railway that Joseph made. Just talk us through Vickers and talk about the man a little bit. It's just fascinating, I think. Yeah,
I think that's how I would describe. So the word that you just mentioned, fascinating. So I think his approach to model railroading, and I think Vikas discovered me. So I was pretty much a lone wolf. I was into all these back in 2012, I think 2011, 2012. I just started building my layout. I was pretty much member of all these model train forums, right? So I think there was one for N scale forum, and then a few others that I was a part of. And Facebook and all was not really that big. So I think somehow I don't remember exactly how he discovered my work, because I used to, I have always been a big fan of documenting my work. So back then I didn't have YouTube and things like that. So I used to do that in the blog. I mean, old-fashioned way. Every progress that I used to make, that used to go in the blog. Whether I had any viewers or visitors, I didn't really care much about it back then. So I think that's how he discovered me, and then I came to know about what he is working on. And the moment I got into his website back in 2012 or 13, if I don't remember exactly when, I was just I was like, what the hell am I looking at? I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, this is beyond professional level. And it is not just about the scenery and what you see on the layout. So I think one of the things that people don't really see in Vikas's layout, and even I didn't see when I visited, because this time I actually visited for a short amount of time, all his infrastructure, like his bench work, his electronics, his wiring, it is, beyond imagination, the amount of method and the amount of craftsmanship and excellence that has gone into it. So everything is pre-planned. So there is nothing. So, and I think he mentioned that in the interview. So he does not believe in the fact that there is a change in the plan. That means that your plan is faulty. So if you have a plan, you better stick to it. And that, I think, is one of the key takeaways, because even for me, my plan always changes, right? And I want to put this in there, and it didn't work out, and I just go and change something
you
up.
And me both.
And in the end, that we just make it look that as if it's intentional, and I meant to do that, and all that jazz. But a real professional work, it always has to be spend as much time as you need to in planning, and then when you're executing, it's just execution one step after the other, and nothing deviates. And it's not just about the layout and just a track plan or where your buildings are going to go and so on and so forth. That is important for sure, but he possibly planned everything even before he did, even before he started. So he had the place, from his bench work, from his lighting, from his electronics, what control, he used Digitrax back then. So whatever the, latest and greatest in Digitrax back in 2011, 2012, that time frame.
Sure.
So he acquired all that. And I think if you go to his blog, you will see that the bench work and everything that he has done, it is, they can survive for 50 or 100 years. They are built so well, in there. So I think that's the learning from Vikas, is that quality is non-compromisable. On the other hand, for Ranjiv, it's completely a different thing. I mean, it's like, it's on the go. It's like passion. It just flows out of him. He just gets down there. He wants to build something. He just builds it. He just keeps building it. And both of them are, great modelers. I mean, India definitely. Or otherwise, I would consider both of them to be one of the most successful modelers that I've ever been to, but they are completely polar opposite of each other in their approach, for sure.
It's funny you're mentioning that. That's one thing I said there. They do have some similarities. Obviously, the scratch building aspect of both of them are phenomenal, but then when I saw Ranji's video, which was some time ago, and I'll link all these below because they're great videos to watch, just talking to these masters of model railroading. And obviously I know a little bit more about Vickers, and just as you say, some of the planning that man's gone to, like so much. So I remember watching one video of his, I think it was the cork sheeting that he had laser cut with exactly where the turnouts were going, where the droppers were going, where the sensors were going, because he uses infrared sensors as well, parts of his layout, where even down to where all his electromagnets and all that were going to for his uncoupling moves. It was just... as you say, it's just, I've never seen it.
It is.
I've never seen it. The closest thing I've seen probably would be something, the Miniature Wonderland or something, which is obviously bigger scale again, but that doesn't have the detail that this layout does. So
exactly. I think I think tech-wise, it can be, you can find some of those in Miniature Wonderland and some of those, public displays. And that's why I mentioned that to be one of the world's finest, because you don't see that finesse. I mean, they still look like shows. That degree of realism that you can experience there, it's mind-blowing. And in a private, layout that's somebody's personal layout, it is mind-blowing what he has done, for sure.
Yeah. Just and I'll put this link to this video. This is incredible. The storm scene that he creates with he's got surround sound speakers all throughout underneath the valance, and he's got strobe lights that set off with which is obviously the DMX lighting that he spoke of and you spoke of, and it's just it's just actually I do have a DMX out of that. I do have a DMX DCC decoder sitting in my cupboard up here. I've done nothing with it. At some stage when I get time, I will use it. Yeah. I'm sure there's probably something else now you can probably use just as well. But unbelievable. So
yeah, absolutely.
So obviously Ranjiv as well. I've reached out. I need to try to reach out to him and get him on my channel at some stage as well, because I think it'd be a fascinating conversation. And Vickers, but obviously we'll chat about that later. But hard man to nail down. I appreciate that. Obviously, we touched on Ranjiv a little bit. Obviously, very polar opposite. He sort of just things flow. He's more they're both artists, don't get me wrong, but he's more fly, the seat of your pants, we might call it in Australia, where he might not plan it to the nth degree, but it just flows and it just looks right. So would that be a fair sort of the way Ranjiv goes about his? Just tell us about this man a little bit, because it's one of until I met you, I'd never heard of him. So.
Oh no, absolutely. So I think where Ranjiv's biggest skill is, I would say, story building. So and that's something I am extremely influenced about as well. So every part of his layout, you get to see, and he takes you in that. I mean, both of them do. I mean, even in Vikas's layout, you basically visit 1970s Germany, and in Ranjiv's layout, you visit 1970s India. But the difference is that, making something look quintessentially Indian is not the easiest thing to do, especially because when you are relying so much on imported items, right? So because there are no Indian figures, there are no Indian buildings. Of course, there are no Indian model trains.
Yeah.
So I think the thing to learn from Ranjiv is the dogged determination that even though this is tough, even though this is, and it's not even a money game, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have, and you can just throw, some people might have a lot of money. They can just say, hey, I just want to build an Indian layout, and I'm just going to give somebody, $100,000 to build me a layout. But even then, you're not going to get anything. No. Because nothing exists. And back then when he started, there was no 3D printing. There was, no, and he didn't have access to all the laser cutting and so on and so forth. So everything is scratch built. And if you really think from that perspective, that every single locomotive, every single rolling stock, the buildings, even the figures, everything is customized, built by hand. That tells you the character of that person, and his determination, how much he cares about Indian prototype. And he says, no matter what happens, I am never going to build something non-Indian just because it is easier for me to build something non-Indian. So in a way that he has that patriotic angle to it. If he builds something, it has to be Indian. So he built everything by hand. Everything is scratch built, and he just brought a different artistic flavor into his whole work. Through his methods.
Gorgeous. And
absolutely.
That's what I love about Trains and meeting yourself. Who would have thought that? I would have met a gentleman from India, for starters. We won't talk about cricket too much, but obviously we might. Things might change a little bit.
there are a lot of Australians and Indians that talk cricket a lot. I think we need some Australian and Indian talk about model trains.
Yeah, that's right. We won't. We'll talk about something that we like. Well, I like cricket as well, but that we won't argue over. There we go.
I played cricket for 10 years. I think I went all the way to district level back in my teens. But but in recent days, it's all about model trains. Yeah, but I do have a plan. I think there was if I remember correctly, some time ago, I don't remember which company, I saw it in Hatton's web shop in the UK. They're actually selling a full cricket team, a test match set in 00 scale. So that actually gave me an idea to build a diorama of a full cricket match being played. But I have to get those figures and find some time to actually build that, because it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
To build that properly. Yeah,
that's fantastic. All right, Kaustav, yet again, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. I don't really write a lot of notes when I talk to you. I have a few little things I want to touch on, but it's just the conversation just goes where it goes. It's just so easy to chat with you. So thanks for taking away. I know you're a very busy man working from home there. Thank you so much for chatting with me today at Model Railroad Techniques.
You're most welcome, Dazzy, and I think this is a true pleasure, believe me. And it's I think we should do this more often than once a year.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's really fun talking to you. No question about it.
You too. Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook and Instagram at Model Railroad Technique.